Hey everybody, welcome to this episode of Compassion and Courage, Conversations in Healthcare. I'm your host, Marcus Engel, and this is the podcast where we teach compassionate communication, provide perspective, and inspire resilience. And today we're kind of stepping out of that zone a little bit, because if you are a longtime podcast listener, you probably know that we typically have on clinicians and people that are in healthcare settings or survivors. And yet, whenever I got Colin Carr's information, I thought maybe this would be another perspective that we should add to the menu. So, Colin Carr, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Marcus. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and Colin, we should say that you're not a clinician, but you work with docs and other practitioners, not just doctors, but other practitioners as well. And you are an expert in commercial healthcare real estate. Did I get that right?
You got it. Yep. So I've been in commercial real estate since I was 19 years old. So I've been doing it for 26 years. I've been in brokerage now for about 23 years. And I started a company in 2009 that was exclusively healthcare focused. So not doing office space or restaurants or land or multifamily, just healthcare. And we decided to go only on the tenant and buyer side. So our only clients were healthcare providers. So physicians, dentists, veterinarians, optometrists. And the game plan was to help level the playing field for healthcare providers with their real estate. I came to the conclusion after working for some of the largest medical landlords in the country that literally 9 out of 10 doctors were going into these deals without representation. And they were losing literally like $400,000, $500,000, $600,000 per deal. I knew the numbers. I knew the margins. I was on the landlord side, and I watched practice after practice just get manhandled, and they didn't even know what was happening. They were signing leases thinking that they did a pretty good job negotiating, and they were literally leaving hundreds of thousands of dollars on the table. So I launched the company in 2009, and here we are 17 years later. We have over 6,000 clients that we're currently representing coast to coast right now as we speak, and have helped tens of thousands of healthcare practices maximize profitability, reduce overhead, eliminate a lot of headaches and hassles with difficult landlords, and just position them to have a higher level of success and honestly just a better quality of life, not having to deal with some of the difficult things that come with commercial real estate.
Yeah, and anybody who's ever done a real estate deal knows that it's you got to have some education going into it. You need some good representation because it's a game all of its own, right? It's a different ball of wax than investing in the stock market or anything like that. So break this down for me. Then how does this affect the patient that is in the chair or in the bed at the veterinarian association, or not the association, but a veterinarian practice or a chiropractor practice or a medical practice? I can understand that it takes the financial burden off, but it also takes off other burdens, you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, location is very important for any practice. I mean, I don't care, or I do care, but regardless of how good of quality of care you provide, if it's not a good facility, if it's not a good location, if it's inconvenient, if there's not good parking, if the neighboring or co-tenants are not ideal, like that does affect the brand. It affects referrals. It affects the way the staff feels when they're showing up to work. I mean, most people have gone to a location for a practitioner and it's just not the quality that it should be. And so we all know what that feels like to walk into a building and be like, this is not what I was hoping, or this is not what I'm hoping, not what I was looking for. So, the quality of location, the quality of the facility, it affects the patient experience. Even if you're in a nice facility, but you haven't renovated your space because you haven't had the money to do so, or the landlord's not giving you the right contribution, going into a renovated space makes a big difference. If you're in the wrong size space, if you say, well, I don't have enough money to upgrade, or I need more space, or I need a different layout, all those things, the ergonomics, the flow, it does affect the patient experience. And at the end of the day, when a provider is stressed because of additional overhead or rent, it does transfer to the patient experience. They can try to do the best they can with their bedside manner and so forth, their chairside manner. But, when people are stressed out because they're paying too much or they're not as profitable as they should be, but they know they're working an extra, half a day a week just to pay the bills that they shouldn't be paying if they had done it properly, that is going to translate to the way they interact with people. So, to me, it goes to the actual owner of the practice. It goes to their staff. It goes to the patients, and it goes to the community. And at the end of the day, we're trying to find the best locations with the best economic terms and put people in place to where their profitability is higher because of the negotiation. They get higher concessions like larger free rent packages, lower annual increases, the most competitive lease rates or purchase price, and then they get legitimate money to renovate or upgrade the space. And so there's a lot more that goes into it, but those are the elements, those are the major elements that we're looking at in every negotiation. And if we do it properly, there's literally a couple $100,000 savings for the provider or the practice. If it's done poorly, they will give up that much money to the landlord or to the seller, and it just means they have to work a lot harder to pay the bills and to make the same amount of money that they could have done otherwise if they had done a better job with the negotiation.
Yeah, always call in the experts when you're doing something like this. Don't immediately assume that just because you're smart in one area that you know how to do it in another. I feel this.
Marcus, that's a good point, because it's not a matter of whether or not you can do the deal. Anybody can do a real estate deal. Anybody can call on properties, search a database, search online, drive an area and call on a sign. Anyone can say, send me a proposal, and anyone can say, well, would you take this instead, or would you do this? That's not the mark of a great negotiation. Anybody can do those things. The question is, did you get the most optimal results? And so what most people realize is being highly talented clinically or being highly talented in a certain industry or area of expertise doesn't translate into others. So I'm great in real estate, but I don't provide my own dental care. I'm very, very savvy with investing, but I don't do my own taxes. Like, you find areas where you're good, and then you bring in people who are equally talented in their area of expertise. You surround yourself with experts, and that's the recipe for creating the highest level of success and ultimately the highest level of profitability.
So you just kind of went into one of my questions that I like to ask guests like yourself who are in positions of leadership, and that is this: who taught you leadership?
I've gotten a lot of leadership from a few people in my life that I've had the privilege of being close to, but a lot of the leadership that I've picked up has just come through, reading, listening to audiobooks, watching or listening to podcasts. I love some of the more like cliche leaders, but I think they're outstanding. I think they're cliche for a reason because they're so prominent, but I love a John C. Maxwell. I think, like 21 irrefutable laws of leadership, like those are bread and butter. I'm going through right now for the second time, 7 Habits of Highly Successful People by Stephen Covey. It's another one of those classics. I read new things, but I try to rotate between new and just tried and true. And I go back through books 2 or 3 times. So that's where I get a lot of it. And then I do have the privilege of being mentored by a few people that have gone before me that are, 20, 30 years my senior, have done a lot more than I have, seen more than I have. And I have the privilege of being able to bounce questions off them and ask them and just sit back and listen.
Yeah, I'd like to reflect on that question of who taught you leadership, because at some point in your life, you realize that I've got talents here to be able to influence people and talk to people in a way that they can understand. And how do I take those talents to the next level, and whatever that next level may be? So thanks for answering that. I just finished Atomic Habits. Have you read that one?
That's on my list. No, I've had that recommended to me by my countless friends and colleagues. I've previewed it. It's in my library. Just have not listened to that one yet, but looking forward to it.
Yeah, it sat in my library for a couple of years before enough people recommended it to me that I was able to experience it. So
I've got 4 or 5 books that are in that category that I'm chipping away at. So, but it's for me personally, like right now I'm doing, again, 7 Habits of Highly Successful People. I did this literally 20 years ago. But it's one I'm camping out in it. Like I could have had it done a couple weeks ago. The more that I go through it and the more that I reflect on it, the more I realize that it's not just like intellectual, like acknowledgement, but there's actionable takeaways. And so I'm trying to get the most I possibly, I'm trying to squeeze as much juice out of this one as I can. I'd rather spend more time in something that's going to actually lead to transformative results than just
Quantity.
say that I read it. So I think a lot of times we read things just to read them, or we get halfway through, or like, I need to get this off the books. And so we, just speed read through it or listen to it. But I think just slowing down and really camping out is a great set of advice for people.
Yeah, agreed. Especially with those that we had a great experience with the first time. Yeah. So let me throw you a little scenario here. My wife and I, when we first got married nearly 20 years ago, we had a wonderful family physician, beloved GP by my in-laws and then by my wife and I. And at one point, we went in for an appointment and he sat us down and said, I need to let you know that the office is going to be closing. And I'm taking another position as a hospitalist in a good sized hospital here in town. And we were sad, of course, to lose him as our doc. But when he explained what he had to do to keep up, the amount of patients that he had to see to keep up with what he was being charged for overhead, ended up being what took him away from his first love, which was clinical in outpatient work. And so I wonder, in a situation like that, those are, I guess, some of the kind of clients that you're looking for.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there are times when real estate can't solve all the other issues. And it could be a number of things. It could just be the patient mix. It could be the insurance base. I mean, there are times when, there's not enough, answers to the problems to really make a difference, and that becomes the right decision. But a lot of times, like, it's a combination of the real estate plus the patient mix or the insurance they're taking, plus the marketing, the referrals, the branding. I mean, there's a lot of times there's a lot of things happening at once. If you got a location that maybe you bought a practice 20 years ago and maybe it's been there for 40 years, or it's not been renovated, or maybe just like the newness of the area has really changed and it's gone downhill. I mean, those are things that are hard to overcome. I can't tell you literally how many hundreds of offices that I've been in where it doesn't matter how much you market or how good you are, you're going to be limited because of people's experience. I mean, people will judge a book by its cover, and they'll second guess referrals when it's in a bad looking building or poorly managed. A lot of times those look decent on the outside, you get inside and they haven't been renovated in 20 years and they're not run well. And so the quality of real estate matters, the location matters. If you walk into a building and it's 40% vacant, it just doesn't give a good feel. It makes people feel like something's wrong with this building. And a lot of times, providers get used to those environments and they're not looking at real estate from the eyes of a new patient. The same thing, you walk into a space and the carpet's old and dirty, the countertops chipped, the ceiling tiles have stains on them, the lights are the old school fluorescents. And so you just get used to it. But a patient walks in and either consciously or subconsciously, they're asking, why is this space not renovated? Like, everything else is, again, everything in this world, it just keeps getting upgraded and renovated and made new. And then you've got a space that's 25 years old that just doesn't look good. So the quality of real estate does make a difference. And then the inside of it too makes a difference. Then obviously the economics do move the needle. I mean, it's not unusual. But let's say you had a 3,000 foot space. That'd be a pretty standard, like, family practice space, medical space. If you're overpaying by, let's say, $3 or $4 a square foot, which is very easy to do, you might be paying an extra $1,000, $1,200, $1,500 per month, even on a small space. If you go to do a lease renewal and you don't capture free rent, even on a lease renewal, I mean, you just lost out on probably $30,000 to $80,000 worth of concession that you could have put in your pocket and started the new lease with that little bonus coming directly to you as the owner. If you're not getting money to renovate the space, and you either go with a space that's unrenovated or you spend your own cash or borrow for it. I mean, again, it just amplifies the challenges you're dealing with. So let me say it this way, competitive lease rates, competitive annual increases, free rent packages, even on lease renewals to start a new lease. If you're moving, to get enough free rent that it offsets all your moving costs, like, that's standard if you do it right. And then just, trying to maximize the profitability, minimize the overhead. Those things all add up to a lot of money and can put people into a nicer property, nicer location, better tenants, better management. and then, lower overhead. And if it's done right, it makes a big difference. If it's not, it's just going to add to those reasons why people, might choose to go work for a hospital system or somewhere else.
Makes sense. And when we're talking about this, I keep picturing a lot of solo practitioner GP offices and chiropractor offices, but you're doing full size hospitals and whole healthcare systems, yes?
Yeah, we don't do a whole lot like for hospital systems.
Okay.
We do a lot with like larger, sophisticated groups too, and that's a great point. Like if private equity backed, venture capital backed organizations that have 100 locations are hiring us, it's because they know that there's so much more they can capitalize on. And so when it's kind of like, what is a Fortune 100 company or Fortune 500 company doing? And then why are you not doing what they're doing if you're an individual, like sole practitioner? But yeah, I mean, we work with everything. We work with, 1,200 square foot, spaces to 20,000 foot spaces. We work on short-term deals, long-term, one office groups to 500 office groups. We do everything you can possibly imagine. It's anybody who says, I know there's a lot of money at stake and I just want to do the best I can with what I have. I want the best opportunity that I can get myself into to win and position myself for the highest level of success. Those are our clients, and, it's across the board.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, and whenever you can do what you're meant to do, even if it's something that does not specifically touch a patient's body as a doctor is laying hands on them, it's still such a big piece of the patient experience. And I'm glad to hear you bring up the ick factor that, you walk into a practice and you're like, or ick. It's just not up to the quality that we expect things to be these days. So it is a feeling that people have even more than, and that translates into the care given by the caregivers and the providers too.
No, it really does. And so, I mean, I recommend everyone have someone walk into their space and just do it with a fresh set of eyes. And it's little things like, what's the flooring look like? What's the carpet? What's the check-in, check-out, like the reception? What's the feel? What's the lighting? When you walk around corners, are the corners chipped? Is the carpet worn out? Are the ceiling tiles old or stained? All of those things. What's the millwork and cabinetry look like? All of those things communicate a message. And it's not hard to figure out which one a client or a patient would prefer. I mean, everyone's walked into a new home versus an old home. Everyone's walked into a new office space versus an old one. Everyone's sat in a nice new car versus an old car. And it's not hard to figure out. I mean, like you're literally taking your patients for an hour or 2 hour test run. Like, do you want them in, like, it doesn't have to be a Rolls Royce, but you want them in a really nice vehicle for that hour and a half, 2 hours, to where they have a great experience. They really enjoy it. They're comfortable the entire time. Or do you want to put them in like a 25-year-old, Honda Civic hatchback that's pretty tore up? And it's a funny analogy, but it's amazing how many people find themselves like proverbial in that terrible ride, and their patients are in that ride and they're just used to it. And they're saying things like, well, I don't have the money to move, or it's already too expensive. The reality is you could probably move into a nicer building for the same price you're paying now, believe it or not. You could get all your moving costs offset by free rent. You get a lot of the costs that it takes to update insurance companies and update patients and, websites and stationery. You get all that cost offset by free rent. And then you could find yourself in a position where the landlord would pay for the vast majority of your bill, sometimes all of your bill out, and you can make a huge upgrade. And it's very common where it does cost a little bit more to do that. It's also very common where it's the same thing you're paying now or even less, because you haven't been capitalizing on the opportunities that are available to you.
My got another doctor here in town, solo practitioner, and he's a friend, and we're in a couple of fraternal organizations together. And he told me a couple of years ago, I just asked him, "Hey, how you doing? How's the practice going?" And he told me about how he had just done a deal and he had upgraded in some way that where it was an extra $20,000 to $40,000 a year in his pocket. And he said, I didn't have to do a thing. And I think about, well, that could be a small amount of money, or that could be a lot of money for certain people. But in a physician's practice realm, even something like that that ultimately goes into your pocket, that's an upgrade, right? Who
Absolutely.
wouldn't want that? Who wouldn't want that?
Yeah, most people, again, they're thinking like, well, I don't have the money for this, or I don't have the time. And again, there is time, or there are times like where, the upgrade does cost a lot more, but it's very common where you've been in a building for 15, 20 years. You've been paying an above market lease rate. You have annual increases that ratchet up and they outpace inflation or even market increases. And so it's not uncommon to have a doctor that you sit down with and they're in a building that's not ideal. It's a poor looking building or poorly managed, and they're paying more than they would pay if they were in a Class A building. I give an example. We have a group in Denver working with this 4 different practices right now, and they are literally minimal. They're $8 a square foot above market. I think they're closer to 11 or 12 if you want to really press it. And these are in spaces. We got a 3,000 foot, a 4,000 foot, an 8,000 foot, and 11,000 foot practice. So you take 8,000 feet times 10 or 11 or $12 a square foot. It's a six figure premium per year that they don't need to be paying. And they can get into a building that's literally like, I'd say 2 or 3 times nicer. And so, I mean, you look at these concepts about, just upgrading to again, just to use another analogy, it's like you're paying for a Honda Civic and you could be like in a Cadillac Escalade or a Lexus. Like it's one of those scenarios where people are like, I don't have the money for that. Possibly, maybe you're in a random scenario where you really are getting a market lease rate and it's the best you can do and everything else is way more expensive. But typically there's options that are superior for quality that are equal or even less in cost, believe it or not.
Makes a lot of sense. Makes a lot of sense. So to bring this back into the medical realm, I suppose, one of the questions I always ask guests is that proverbial question of reflecting on a time that someone was there for you or that you have been there for another person. Is there any experiences, whether personal or professional life, that a story pops up for you?
Yeah, I can think of one. I can think of one for our company. We started a company. I started a company with just myself in '09. Grew it to a very sizable multi-million-dollar business and had great success. And then really felt led that it was time to scale and go national. And when we started to do that, you go from working in one state, all of a sudden you're in 15, 20 states. You go from having one attorney to having 10 attorneys. I mean, everything just multiplies and grows. And I remember having a number of things that I'd never been faced with as far as running a business. I'd never seen some of these issues. And I was sitting down with one of my mentors and he said, Colin, some of your greatest innovations, efficiencies and upgrades or promotions are going to come in times when you get pressed and you have to think differently. And I remember at the time thinking, I've got these 4 or 5 issues. I don't know how to solve for them. But I remember him asking me, like, if you could solve for them, what would that be to your organization? And I remember thinking, if I could solve for these 4 or 5, it would change everything. And so, one of my other mentors during the same time said, issues and problems equal opportunities. And so it was a play off of IPO, initial public offering. He was saying, no, issues and problems create opportunities for you. And so the people that really succeed find issues and problems. We're not trying to find them to make them, but when they're there, you don't run from them. And you're just seeking to figure out, how can I capitalize? How can I grow professionally? How can I become the best version of myself that I need to be? And so I just remember I had a couple of guys that were close to me that had gone before me. And they just kept saying things like, don't run from the problems, be honest about them. Don't ignore them. But look at them as opportunities for promotion, for growth, for increase. And if you can figure out how to create greater efficiencies, you're going to go to the next level. And so it was a series of literally probably a year or two where I was just constantly faced with new things that I'd never seen before. And thankfully we were able to upgrade, fix, optimize every one of them. And if we wouldn't have, we would have either stayed the same size or gone backwards. Because we were able to go to the next level many times over. And I remember those seasons distinctively.
Well, thank you for that, because that actually speaks to a couple of issues that I'm currently having in my life, and I'm going to take that advice into consideration very much. So thank you for that. And then the last question I have for you, and I always frame this as you've got the world's biggest billboard on the world's highest mountain. What message do you want to broadcast to humanity? But I suppose with you, I would say, what message do you want to continually broadcast to your people, to your company, to your associates?
Yeah, we've got, it's a great question. We've got, we really have two primary like mission statement or vision statements. And the external one for our clients is just to help them have the most successful practices and live the best life they can possibly live. And then internally, it's to help our agents and our staff and our team, just to become the best version of themselves they can possibly be. And we talk a lot about that. If you become more valuable, you'll make more money. If you help more people, you will become more impactful and influential. If you become more impactful and influential, you'll have more opportunities. You'll grow. I mean, like, it's all tied together. So our messaging to the people on the outside is, we want to be an advocate for you. We want to protect you. We want to help you increase your profitability. And again, have the most successful practice possible. Internally, we want you to become the best version of yourself you can possibly be. And with that comes greater control of your life, schedule, lifestyle, make more money doing that because you're more transformative in the marketplace. And so those are the things, those are the messages, and be focused on helping others and then helping yourself. And if you do both those at a high level, you're typically positioned to win in any environment you go into.
Love it. Love it. Colin Carr, thank you so much. We're going to have all the links to your web presences and email and such. And I just want to thank you so much for your expertise, giving us a little bit of new perspective, and for your time on Compassion and Courage.
Thanks, Marcus. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. And listeners, thank you for being on this episode of Compassion and Courage. Again, for all your keynote speaking needs, healthcare consulting, books, etc., please reach out to marcusengel.com. Thank you all so much for being on this episode of Compassion and Courage.